Benzo.com, that Benzo.com, that Benzo.com, that Benzo.com.
Hello, I'm Robert Piccirillo, but my nom de plume is Bobby Pickles, and this is episode 31 of the Bobby Pickles podcast. My guest today is writer Van Wallach. His new book, A Kosher Dating Odyssey, One Former Texas Baptist Quest for a Naughty and Nice Jewish Girl, is the tale of a man from a small town in central Texas who was raised a Southern Baptist despite his parents' Jewishness, and later on decided to explore his Jewish background and assimilate into the predominantly Jewish Northeast by courting Jewish women. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. The town I grew up in was in South Texas, but yes, my parents were both Jewish. I was raised a Southern Baptist until I was in high school. Then I decided that it wasn't really right for me, and I began exploring my Judaism. Moved to the Northeast, became part of the Jewish community here, even though I always retain a big dose of the Texas boy in me.
That's kind of the reason why I wanted to talk to you today on the podcast, because I relate. You know, I too was a product of a Southern upbringing, and I too felt like I was somewhat of a fish out of water. And my parents, who were both shared similar Italian-American backgrounds, they both bagged up their respective carpets and fled from Connecticut back in the 70s, went down and moved to like the west coast of Florida.
Okay.
And that's where I was raised. But the reason why I'm here, I'm getting back to my roots. You know, so we're both kind of like, we're the opposite of carpetbaggers, I guess. Do you know what a carpetbagger is?
Yeah.
Right? What's a carpetbagger?
Carpetbagger was a northerner who went to the South after the Civil War to be part of the Reconstruction and process and trying to make their fame and fortune.
Right.
Mostly their fortune.
And benefit financially,
Right,
off of that. And so do you know what the counterpart to that is? What we are?
Scalawags?
Scalawags. We're a couple of scalawags.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I don't know where I heard it from, but I heard it somewhere that there's similar traits that writers share. It has something to do with like where you're from. I don't know if I just made that up just now.
No, I think writers always have some common bonds because they're people that are both looking outwardly, like trying to understand what's going on in the world. At the same time, they have to do a lot of time spent on their own, sitting down and trying to write something. So they're people that kind of exist both way out there and then way inside, because you have to really sit and kind of look inside yourself and process your life experiences and get them down on paper or on audio.
I was trying to find it. I was trying to Google it while I was coming over here, but I don't know what kind of media I heard it on, if I just read it on the internet. But, like, I was an English major, you know? I'm a writer, somewhat of one.
Okay.
I've never won a Pulitzer or anything like that, but I could string a couple sentences together. And I have issues with where I'm from, you know, the same kind of thing. Anyway.
One thought I have on it is one thing that I mentioned in the book that I read that made a huge amount of sense to me is by the former New York Times columnist James Reston, who once wrote or said, "How do I know what I think until I read what I write?" And I thought that made a lot of sense because oftentimes I feel like I come across as a little inarticulate or a little incoherent. Once I kind of write down what I'm thinking on a subject, then
honestly,
that's
I shouldn't even be conducting a podcast right now. You know, I mean, really, I can write so eloquently, but sometimes when I speak, I just sound like I'm semi-retarded. You know.
Oh, one other thing you might be interested in knowing is
what?
If you want, I can tell you the story about my Italian middle name.
Okay, tell me.
Okay, my middle name is Tazio.
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 That's an awesome name.
Van Tazio Wallach.
Do you know what that means or anything like that?
Well, it's the Italian version of, I believe, Thaddeus. I'm named after the Italian race car driver Tazio Nuvolari. It's very popular in, I think, the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
That's pretty interesting.
And the way that happened was that my father was a car nut, and my brother and I were both born in France, where he moved over there after my parents got married so he could worked on an Air Force base, but he was really interested in pursuing things with the car industry over there. And both of us are named after cars. So my brother is Cooper.
Did you ever read The Art of Racing in the Rain?
No.
It's actually pretty interesting. It's a book about a dog. The guy, he owns a dog. The whole book is based on the dog, what he's thinking and stuff like that. He's named Enzo, named after the
Enzo
race
Ferrari.
Yes. Yeah. Which is really interesting because I actually have a dog of my own, right? and his name is Enzo. He was not named after Enzo Ferrari or anything like that. And my t-shirt company is called Fat Enzo.
Okay.
It's based on my dog. And I was so mad when I discovered that there's a book out. I had to do the math and figure out that I had Enzo before this book was published.
Okay.
So I didn't steal the name or anything
Yeah,
like
so
that.
Tazio, which was yet another thing that was embarrassing growing up in South Texas, having an Italian middle name, which, in an environment that's 90% Hispanic, it was just like one more thing that seemed a little odd about me.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, scalawags and carpetbaggers alike, meet Van Wallach.
Hello, I'm Van Wallach. What's your name? Outstanding. Welcome to the Bobby Pickles podcast.
Bobby Pickles podcast. He always says, "That's me." With that look on his face, he'll talk about anything. Tattoos, t-shirts, politics, history, and hot sauce on everything. Bobby Pickles. Pop culture, documentaries, conspiracy theories, sarcasm, and beer. It's a conversation. Start listening, cause we're all here. Bobby Pickles podcast. That's me.
That's me, Bobby Pickles, and today I'm podcasting from the steps of the New York Public Library.
Right? The Schwarzman Bldg?
I always ask my guests to meet me somewhere that's either iconic or important to them in some way, and I know we originally agreed to meet in Bryant Park. However, it was a little crowded over there, and I already did a podcast there once before earlier in the year, so I decided maybe the steps of the Public Library would be a nice setting. What do you think?
I think it's great. As a writer, libraries are always important to me. I love books. Grew up taking armfuls of books out of the Mission Public Library.
You did?
And, yeah. And also, the library of the church I went to, a lot of Dr. Seuss books. So
How did you get into the writing, though? Wasn't your background in, like, economics?
Economics is what I majored in at Princeton,
Yep.
but that was really something, just a practical topic to write about. Both of my parents were even though they were divorced, were very practically minded and wanted me to study something practical. So instead of, say, majoring in like Slavic studies or English or history, I majored in economics and was a mediocre student. But really, I've been writing all my life. I learned to read.
Isn't it a Jewish thing, though, like where you want your kids to do something that's safe? Would that be considered? I don't know. I'm coming from ignorance on the...
I don't know if it was a Jewish thing. I think my parents were just concerned about the future. My mother graduated from high school, went to college for a year, flunked out. My father, I don't think he graduated from college. So they both were concerned about finding something that was workable for me. My mother never really had much time for like abstractions and philosophical discussions. So it made sense. And I'm taking a little different approach with my son. So, I learned from my experiences and I'm applying them to his education.
So tell me about the book and the story and everything like that. It's kind of like a memoir, right?
Right. It's a memoir that deals with several different topics. One would be my upbringing in Texas, my family background, which I've done some research on.
So how did this happen? You're a Jewish person, but
Yep.
you were raised Southern Baptist.
Right. It happened. Both of my parents were Jewish, and they were married in the temple in McAllen, Texas. My mother was, in fact, the great-granddaughter of the first ordained rabbi in Texas. So the roots go back a long way. And what happened was that my parents married for 5 years, 2 sons, split up, and my mother returned to her hometown in Texas, which town of about 11,000, 3 miles from Mexico, right on the border.
Mm-hmm.
And she really had no interest in Judaism. She had some contacts in the local Jewish community just because she grew up there.
What type of people were down there in that area of Texas?
It was 90% Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
And the 10% that was Anglo tended to be very conservative, Christians, Catholics, Methodists, Baptists.
A lot of evangelical Christians.
Evangelical, yeah. I mean, that was the Christian environment that was around there for the most part.
A lot of farms.
Yeah, it's very much still an agricultural area.
And very Hispanic as well?
Very Hispanic, yeah, and which was actually something that I can appreciate a lot more now than I did when I was growing up.
Why is that?
It's right on the border with Mexico, and that was like terra incognita. I mean, the gringos like me, like, oh my God, Mexico, like really dangerous. And it wasn't anything like it is now. And I wish I'd taken more of an opportunity to learn more about it and appreciate it, as opposed to seeing it as like dropping off the edge of the world.
Have you been to Mexico?
Actually, as part of my dating experiences, I went to Mexico to meet a woman. When I was growing up, I went to Mexico a few times, just right over the border in Reynosa. I grew up in kind of the paranoid gringo community that didn't really like going to Mexico too much. So
as a child, your parents, they divorced?
They divorced.
You know what? It's exactly like my story. My parents, they fled to Florida, start over. I think the whole state is basically comprised of the same type of people. They screw up their lives wherever they're from, go down there and start anew. Anyway, they had 2 boys, me and my brother.
Yeah.
They divorced. I'm a product of a broken marriage.
Okay.
Same thing. Intermarriage. My mom was married 3 times, you know, two different stepdaddies. And I was reading some of your book, and it has to do with the same kind of thing. Your mother actually didn't intermarry, but all her sisters did and things?
She had one sister who intermarried, married a Baptist man, my Uncle Bill, and Aunt Charlotte became a very devout Christian. But she was never ashamed of her Jewish background at all. In fact, at the end of her life, my mother had cancer and lived with her older sister. And after she died, her mother had a gravestone for her put in the Jewish cemetery in a town called Gonzales, Texas. So Aunt Charlotte, I was always deeply grateful that she did that.
You mentioned in the book the 2 different Jewish cemeteries that are in the town. There's like one on one side, one on the other.
Right. I mean, there's like one really old Jewish cemetery, and then there's the other one, which was where my mother, her parents, their grandparents, like dozens of people.
In the book, you go over your lineage.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how your great-great-grandfather was the first rabbi in McAllen, Texas. Is that correct?
Well, he was the first rabbi in Texas.
First rabbi in Texas.
First ordained rabbi in Texas. He moved from Kempen, Germany in the 1870s, moved to a town north of Houston, and is quite a scholar. All the books on Texas Judaism mention him. He's usually, there's a picture of him on the cover of most of them, Rabbi Chaim Schwartz.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then so somehow you completely get assimilated into Texas and you become basically evangelical Southern Baptist.
I mean, our land,
That's how you're
my
raised.
mother rented a house from a woman, and our landlady was a...
How did that shape how you think of the world? Your whole outlook on everything. I mean,
I tend to be... I think all of this makes me more open to people with different opinions. So even though I'm here in the Northeast, most of my friends tend to be quite... liberal and Jewish and like, oh, evangelicals, Christians. And like, oh, Sarah Palin, oh, isn't she terrible? But I don't feel that way at all. I can see where they're coming from. I can kind of understand that culture, and so it doesn't bother me. At the same time, maybe some of my friends in Texas may be a little askance, like, oh, the gays and the Jews and the blacks and the,
If it's anything
liberals.
like Florida is, it took me about like a year and a half. I was just sitting there and I was talking amongst my coworkers. And I had an epiphany that I didn't care what color anybody was, what sexual orientation they were. I just saw everybody as people.
Yeah.
And that Florida upbringing, though, they'll drop the N-word constantly.
Yeah.
If it's anything like Texas.
Yeah, well, my mother's attitude was be friends with everybody. And she never had a bad word to say about any ethnic, racial grouping. And she was accepting of, of gays, in her comments, which I thought was quite...
That's so progressive for that time, right?
Yeah, I mean, in that she didn't express any... There's no hostility, and she just didn't have any prejudices that I remember, other than, you stay out of debt and you make you support yourself. That was like her big thing in life.
So if there was no intermarriage between your mother and Baptist, man, then how did you become Southern Baptist? Did you do this on your own? You went and you got baptized and everything?
I mean, it was the she let our landlady take us to church.
Okay.
There was the First Baptist Church of Mission, and Mom had no deep connection to the Jewish community, and so she let our landlady take us there, my brother and me, and look, it became like a home. It became being a part of the community, making friends, and I think I always had an air of questioning, of wanting to be part of something larger than myself, and Christianity provided that, and I got into it. But at the same time, I was always aware that I was Jewish. We had elements of a Jewish home with a menorah and some Jewish books, and so I grew up kind of evangelical, but kind of confused at the same time.
Wow, it's interesting.
And then I came to visit my father, who eventually moved to New York, and he always stayed Jewish, and he talked to me about it and got me to think about it. And I think moving from Christianity to Judaism, part of it was philosophical, part of it was a teenage rebellion.
Yeah, but you are absolutely Jewish as far
as
far as like Judaism goes, right?
Yeah,
it goes on your mother's line.
Mother's side. I mean, both my parents 100% Jewish. Father's family goes back to Russia.
So you go to Israel? Have you gone?
I was in Israel in '82. That's the only time I've been there, but I was there. I enjoyed it. I'd like to go back.
Right.
And I've been to...
Because what happens when you're absolutely Jewish, you're down the mother's line or whatever, then you have a right to come there and become like a citizen, right? If you want?
Yeah, there's the right of return.
The right of return, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, I've never looked into it. what are the laws about it? If you convert to another religion, can you still go over?
You came and you visited your father, right?
Yeah, that was in the early 70s.
And is that when you started embracing your Judaism?
Yeah, that's when I started getting interested in it and aware of it, and my Baptist beliefs, it just didn't feel like me. It felt like something that had been felt like kind of a square peg in a round hole, and it wasn't really right for me.
Yeah. I understand where you're coming from. I was raised Catholic, and I went to Catholic school my entire life. And being in Florida, where there are a lot of evangelical people, just like Texas, even though it's also a branch of Christianity, I just didn't understand their way about it, how they pray with their hands up, and I don't know, all those
the
things.
Pentecostalists.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that what that is? That's like the snakes, though, right?
Well, that's getting way out there, like the Pentecostal snake handlers, like in Tennessee and
Did you ever see any of that stuff?
No, I mean that's Southern Baptists are conservative in their theology, but
they are.
Do they
have like communion or anything like that?
No communion. That's not a
Okay.
Baptism, but the different degrees of clapping and singing, and I mean you have all different kinds. So, no, but I mean, the environment I grew up in was very subdued.
And so how did you feel in that conservative atmosphere? Like you said, your mother was very liberal, progressive thinking.
In her own way, yeah.
In her own way?
In her own way.
Okay, in her own way.
I mean,
But you shared that kind of liberal philosophy, right?
I have a live and let live philosophy. I would say politically, I'm a mixture of things.
Yeah.
I mean, the people in Texas think I'm like a commie tree hugger. And the people up here think I'm like a, crypto-fascist Texas gun nut. So nobody can understand me.
Wow.
But, that's okay.
I think that's just like the perfect traits that make up a good writer. And really, to be honest with you, I really enjoyed your writing. Sometimes I'll read whoever's book, whatever they're trying to push, and it's just not good. And I genuinely enjoyed, the little bit that I did read. It was I could just tell that you're a good writer.
Right. Well, thank you. Well, what I really like in writing is when it's easily understandable. I don't relate well.
Very direct writing.
To books
I do that too.
It's
also,
like, what is this person trying to say? Trying to impress me with 10-line sentences and Baroque sentences.
Get right to the point.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Absolutely. Anything that you can write in 10 words or you can write in 5, you always choose 5.
Right. Keep it tight, bright, and light, as we used to say in journalism.
Tight, bright, and light?
That's what you say in journalism, yeah. Back when there was a journalism
Let's talk
industry.
about that.
Okay.
So you started interning at Newsday, is that right?
I was an intern at Newsday, summers of 70.
How did that happen coming out of economics, though?
Well, you got to remember, I was always a writer. Economics was just something to major
That was just,
in.
right, that was just something to major in.
I mean,
Why didn't you major in journalism, though, if you were into it?
Well, Princeton, there was no journalism program.
Okay.
So what I did do, I was on the Daily Princetonian. I was an editor, and I was developed more as a feature writer than a news writer, which is kind of how my career developed.
How about coming out of Princeton? Do you feel better than most people having gone to such a school?
It gave me a start in life, but it didn't guarantee anything. Because
did you ever get in any kind of fraternities or anything like that?
There were no fraternities. I was in an eating club called Colonial Club, with just other.
There are no fraternities at Princeton?
No, I mean maybe now they're unofficial.
I mean, even like Yale. I mean, they had Skull and Bones.
Secret societies, yeah.
You didn't try to get into some secret society?
No, because there wasn't anything like that.
It's a perfect opportunity. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the thing about Princeton was even though you think punched your ticket. Great for life, but I had a very rocky time after I left Princeton. I mean, started at Forbes magazine as a reporter researcher. That didn't work out.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Went to a kind of a schlocky trade magazine covering frozen foods. That company left New York, and I found myself less than 3 years after I graduated from Princeton on an unemployment line in Brooklyn. So
very humbling.
Very humbling, and I learned that Princeton just means that you were able to get in, you have opportunities to make connections and learn a lot. It made me into a lifelong learner, but it by no means guaranteed anything in life.
Pardon my ignorance, but where's Princeton at?
Central New Jersey.
It's Central New Jersey. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I knew that. Okay, anyway, so that got you up here,
Yep.
and you decided to stay.
And I decided to say I applied.
Why'd you decide to stay?
I like to describe myself as an action junkie. I like New York. I've been hanging around here really since I went to Princeton, and it's got great job opportunities. I mean, socially, it always worked out pretty well for me, and I take the train in every day. I never get tired of being here.
So that was your first experience, taking the New Jersey Transit in from Princeton?
Taking the bus from Princeton to
Penn
New York
Station or to
Port Authority.
Port
Back
Authority.
when the Port Authority was just like,
it's very
Baghdad.
seedy.
Yeah. It used to be a place called the Terminal Bar right across the street, and I thought that was a very appropriate name.
Yeah. It still is seedy. So only imagine how it was then.
Yeah, it was rough.
That's one of the more rough places, I feel, in Manhattan.
I remember when you couldn't go into Bryant Park.
Really?
Yeah, when Times Square, it's like really bad. I mean, this place has been totally transformed over the past 20 years. I mean, the murder rate's gone down by like 75%.
Gentrification, however, you have to be completely rich to live in Manhattan now, which sucks, No more artists. It kind of takes away the feel of that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's, success can bring the seeds of its own downfall.
Yes. Okay, so you're up here. You love it.
Yep.
You're interning at...
I was an intern at Newsday, working on the news desk, answering phones. First summer, second summer, I was a feature writer for the Part 2 section of Newsday. Summer of 79, gas crisis summer.
Right, during Carter.
Yep.
So that was all happening, and you were covering all that stuff. You interviewed a couple of pretty interesting people. Right off the bat, Howard Stern.
Right. I mean, when I was a freelance writer in New York in the mid-'80s, I hooked up with a publication called Whole Life Times, which was kind of like the groovy granola meditation magazine here. And I started doing, some articles, and then they started giving me celebrity interviews to do. And one of the ones that I did that was really great was with Howard Stern, and I was a big fan of his at the time.
That was right when he was coming up, right?
This is when he was he had started at WNBC AM, and then he moved over to K-Rock.
Wow.
And I interviewed him right, I think, when he made that transition, when he was really starting to break out. And
what year was this? Early 80s?
This is 87.
Okay. So you didn't just have that one little stint at Newsday. You worked at a number of different organizations, writing, doing journalism.
Right. I mean, I was,
How long were you a journalist for?
I was a journalist for 15 years.
Okay.
Professionally, I moved to New York in 1980, and I was laid off of my last job in journalism in 95. And then since then, I've been involved in more corporate communications.
What stood out about Howard Stern?
Well, Howard Stern, in person, he's very kind of like soft-spoken guy. Great interview, really. We were talking more specifically about fitness issues because he was involved in something then called the Alexander technique because of, back issues. And so I did research on that. And I still talk to him about his show, but my approach when I do an interview is I like to do a lot of research and ask people questions that maybe they haven't been asked before. Because most people, like, Howard Stern and Abby Hoffman.
How am I doing?
You're doing great.
All right.
Most people have done so many interviews that they can do it on automatic. And as a journalist, I like to do a lot of research and ask people questions that, not to embarrass them, but just make them think or kind of illuminate something about their background.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what I did with Abby Hoffman.
Yeah, tell me about Abby Hoffman.
Well, Abby Hoffman started a radio show this is like in 85, 86. I don't know if it was on WBAI, but it was called Radio Free USA. And this is not too long after he had resurfaced from being underground for a long time. And I got the assignment from Whole Life Times. I was very excited about it. And I knew this is like the master media manipulator. So I did a lot of research. I read his books. I read as much about him as I could in those pre-internet days. Had my tape recorder, went over there. I met him in his apartment when he shared with his girlfriend on East 34th Street. And, we really had a great conversation. We probably talked like 2 or 3 different interviews, like 5 or 6 hours. The sad thing is that it never actually appeared in print because I think it took so long, it was so expensive to get the interview transcribed that the publisher didn't want to pay for it. He thought it was too stale. And then, unfortunately, Hoffman's show was canceled, and then maybe 2 or 3 years after that, he unfortunately committed suicide.
Yeah.
So it was very sad. But I don't think I have the full transcript, but I think I still have the tapes, and I have I have a summary of things I did. So I put those online at one time. I called it Interview with a Ghost.
What exactly was Abby Hoffman all about? What made him famous? Once again, I'm ignorant.
Sure.
However, at least I'm open about it, and I would like for our listeners to know a little bit about.
Sure. Abby Hoffman was.
He was just a big hippie guy, right?
Well, he was very political.
He
was very knowledgeable.
American flag
Yeah,
shirt.
he was one of the Chicago 7 that had disrupted the Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968. He went on trial for that with other members, I think, of SDS, Judge Julian Hoffman. He was like a real prankster, very good at organizing media events, jokes, great public speaker. I think, unfortunately, he was also a manic depressive. That might have been the issue for him. Something happened. I don't know if it was a drug conviction, but he vanished for 7 or 8 years. Living underground, he kind of reinvented himself as an environmental activist, I believe, in upstate New York. I think his name was Barry Freed, and he finally just had enough of it, and he resurfaced. I don't know if the charges were dropped. I don't think he did any jail time, but he just kind of got out and started getting active kind of in the Reagan years, like anti-war efforts and Iran-Contra. So
I didn't know that he was still active during that time. I just thought it was during, like, the 60s and 70s or something.
Yeah,
like
I mean, he was active in a different way. He went underground on environmental. He came back in the 80s and was kind of high profile, but I don't think he could get it together. I mean, it's very sad. I mean, he was probably younger when he killed himself than I am now, which is a very sobering thing to think about, and I was very sad to see him go. I think he would have been a great person to still have around.
Yeah. So, all right. Jim Lehrer.
Jim Lehrer.
I'm a big PBS guy.
Yep.
I don't even have TV in my house, but if I did, I would just have like the bunny ears or something like that, as long as I can catch Channel 13 up here. I love it. Charlie Rose.
Oh.
He's the best.
Well, Jim Lehrer, again, this is in the mid-'80s, and I pitched a couple of stories at Continental Magazine, Continental Airlines based in Houston.
One of the magazines that are on the airport.
In-flight publications,
in-flight,
which are great market for journalists if you can break into them.
Really?
Great visibility, very glossy publications. I found it very hard to break into, but Continental Magazine liked a couple of stories I pitched, and they wanted me to do the profile of Jim Lehrer. So I did a profile of Jim Lehrer, which is great because he's also from Texas, and ex-Marine, like big fan of public transportation. So did a lot of research, went down to Washington, interviewed him. Great interview. Interviewed the other guy, McNeil, here in New York to talk about him.
Who's McNeil?
The McNeil Lehrer News Hour.
Oh, that's how. Okay,
there is a McNeil. I mean, before there.
But McNeil's not around anymore.
No, he's still alive.
But is he still on?
No, he hasn't been on the show in a long time.
Right? Yeah, because
they may be doing business together, but I think he's still around. Maybe doing more like corporate things. He did like the Story of English series. So I went down there, did a profile, fact-checked it, appeared in the magazine, and it was great. And it was weird, like, that was like over 25 years ago, and like Jim Lehrer is still, like, you still see him on TV, and he kind of looks and sounds the same.
Right. What stuck out about that interview?
He's a gracious, kind of no-nonsense guy. He's very dedicated to the news business. What you hear about him, what you see about him is the way he is. There's no artifice to the guy. Texas twang and his dedication to the news business. I mean, that's why the News Hour is still really the only news show I watch.
Now, while you were going through your journalism career, during this time where you started your infatuation with Jewish women and this whole thing came about.
Well, the infatuation with Jewish women really began as soon as I moved to Princeton.
Okay.
I mean,
what was it about Jewish women that...
I think there was just an emotional connection. I like the way they look. I like the way they sound. They're educated. This applies to everybody, of course. I think there's like a spiritual or religious connection with how you kind of look at God, at the holidays, at the cycle of life.
You said you have a child, right?
Yeah, I have a son.
Is his mother Jewish?
Oh, yeah, my ex-wife, 100% Jewish, and we were married.
How'd you meet?
We met on a subway platform in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And we met that way. I thought she was beautiful. We exchanged business cards. She's also a writer. Nothing happened for a couple of years. Then we saw each other at meetings of the National Writers Union. Still nothing happened. We were always dating other people. And then a common acquaintance of both of us thought we'd go good together, and she invited us to a party. And that's when things started to happen. We were married to the Kane Street Synagogue in Brooklyn.
Was part of your thing, because I know it is mine in some sick way, I don't know why, but I want my kids to like have that Italianness. And so that's kind of why I would like to meet an Italian-American girl up here. Yeah. Did you kind of have that same drive when you were searching for your mate?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was no question that when I married that my wife was going to be Jewish. And after I moved to New York, I only dated Jewish women. That's just the way, that was a driving interest of mine, and that was the source of connection.
I totally get that. I would go for Greek or something like that, too. I just don't want normal white bread, like down south, watered down, no background, no...
Right.
That's just my thing. I don't want that for my children.
Right.
I don't know. Do you kind of have that same sick outlook?
Nah, not really. I mean, Jews, Italian people come in all different kinds of colors. So
they do?
Yeah, I mean, Judaism is more diverse than people would think.
Yeah, Judaism it's not just a religion. It's like a culture.
It's a culture. It's like a civilization. I mean, different people stress different parts of it. But you go to Israel and you will see black Jews from Ethiopia, Hispanic Jews. They're all kinds.
Right. There's Sephardic.
Sephardic
is very dark.
Greek, Italian.
Correct. It is?
Yeah. Egyptian, Turkish. You might get an image of Jews from like Woody Allen movies where all Jews are like from the Upper West Side or New Jersey. That's not the case at all. I mean, I'm a Jew from Texas. I know Jews from Latin America.
Just like when you go to Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico, everybody's shade is the whole rainbow.
Right.
It's the whole spectrum. When you go to certain places, you feel like that person's supposed to look like this, and then you see that there's all these different varieties. It's the same thing with Judaism.
Yeah.
So how do you see Judaism? You see it as a culture, a civilization, or a religion, or all of them, or something else?
I think it's really all of them. It's going to have elements of everything. Culture, you might think of culture in a broad sense, like certain kind of books, movies, politics, civilization, the same. But I think ultimately, for it to succeed and keep succeeding like it has for like 4,000 years, it's really the religion, I think, is key. Observing the holidays, knowing the Torah, the Bible, knowing...
You grew up not knowing, though, the Torah and the Bible, right? Didn't you?
I know. Southern Baptists know the Bible. I mean, I grew up reading the Bible. I knew it. I was just reading the King James Version.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I continue to...
But you never had like a bat mitzvah?
Well, since I'm a
bar
male, I
mitzvah?
wouldn't. I hope I would.
I'm sorry, bar and bat.
No, I
That's
didn't
the
have a bar
difference,
mitzvah.
right?
My son did, though.
So you never had a bar mitzvah?
Nope.
You technically are Jewish through your lineage.
Yeah.
However, you're raised Southern Baptist. But
Yeah.
did you have to convert to Judaism?
No.
Back to Judaism?
No.
You can't.
No.
Like,
No.
that'd
I
be
mean,
crazy, right?
if you're Jewish,
You're
I mean,
Jewish,
if
you're
your mother,
Jewish, right?
I mean, depending on how you look at it, but if your mother's Jewish,
There's no
then
like
you're-
specific thing you have to do to join the club or anything like that to make it official?
No. I mean, I just started going back to. I went to services at Princeton, and I started as soon as I moved to New York. I started looking at different temples and synagogues. While my peers were out looking at bars and discos, I was going to the synagogues. Kind of the same result sometimes.
Right. I know, because that's where you're fishing.
That's where I was fishing. I caught a couple of fish that way.
You caught a couple of fish that way.
Yeah.
You found some good ones?
Yeah, I mean, good fish. Meet somebody at synagogue. But if you get involved with somebody where you go to the same religious institution, if it doesn't work out, it can get a little awkward.
So what did you learn? I mean, you wrote the book about this, right?
Yeah.
About searching for Jewish women, essentially, correct?
Yep.
It's kind of like a how-to book and a memoir, right? Both
Yeah,
kinda-
I mean, it's not about how to pick up women.
It's not?
No, it's not. And see, that's what separates it from other books on dating. You look at what other men do.
Yes.
Other books, and I did my research, most books are like how to pick up chicks, how to be like a stud, and that wasn't my intent at all. It was really to talk about online dating from a male, sensitive new age male perspective, if you want to call it that. So the book's really about what I encountered, like the humanity I found, the difficulties.
When did all this dating happen, though? I mean, you got married, and then you had a child. What, are you? Does the book cover before the marriage and then afterwards?
Yeah, it covers the growing up part and the dating in the 80s. It covers that. I don't really talk about my marriage because that's not really...
Well, I'm just saying, for the purposes of the dating, when did that
was really happening between like 2002 and 2008. So like a 6-year window there.
So the whole online thing is exploding, right?
That's, yeah.
It's really changing the whole scene of
completely
how,
changed it.
Even right now, I mean, there's all kinds of, it's crazy. Like, it's very easy to find a date online, and it's reshaping the way that we date.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, it's still incredibly antique in the 80s. And then when I got divorced and started looking around again, it was like, wow, it's like, you see pictures, you can write to people instantaneously. I mean, it used to be like answering ads in New York Magazine and Village Voice. It took weeks. You'd write a letter, you'd mail it, maybe they'd write you back, maybe they wouldn't. By the time they'd write back, you'd forget who it was. With online, it completely changes the dynamic and opens up a lot more possibilities.
So you've done that through the Village Voice, obviously?
Oh, yeah. I met some women through the Village Voice.
The old school way to do it.
Back when the Village Voice, yeah. This was back in the days where you had like 5 or 6 lines, and like there were no pictures. It was all totally the theater of the mind.
And they would just say, what, single white female or something like that?
Yeah, single white female, 5'6", Jewish, looking for 5'11", Jewish male, let's go out to the Hamptons, and I like music and beaches, and so, I mean, it was all very brief. I knew definitely much more of a scattershot approach. Mm-hmm. And I remember when New York Magazine tried to start running pictures of people with singles ads, and I was like, oh my God, look at this. You can actually see who it is.
Wow. And
now, I mean, these people don't have singles ads at all.
So do you think online dating is a good way to go?
I think it's a great way to go. I think that it gives you a way of seeing a lot of people. I think you can learn a lot from profiles that women write and men. I think you can present yourself in a way that attracts a certain kind of woman. So I wrote my profile to appeal to like creative, artistic, intellectual, educated women, Jewish. If you want to appeal to, say, Italian women, then you can mention,
What should I do?
You could maybe have a picture of yourself standing in front of the Coliseum. You could say about looking for a woman who speaks Italian, interested in Italian culture in New York. Maybe, so you may not be Italian, but you may have an interest, kind of an Italian groupie.
Right.
So just be upfront with what your interest is, and put it out there.
Yeah, kind of market yourself like that, right?
Yeah.
Put it out in the universe.
Yeah, and you see what happens.
Do you
and then,
believe in that kind of stuff, like the universe, like The Secret? If you put it out there, if you talk about it, you can invite that into your life. Positive thoughts.
I don't know if it's you invite it into your life. I think you get out and you look for it, and you find it yourself. I don't believe in I read the book, the Law of Attraction. I don't know. It's
really a McDonald's version of what the real thing is. The real thing is just more encompassing.
You get out and make your luck. The way I look at life, you never make anything happen if you're just sitting at home watching TV. You got to answer that opportunity for an interview. You got to write to that woman that you see online. You need to write that book and put it out there. You make things happen in your life.
Oh, you came in through Grand Central. You came in on the Metro North, right?
Yep.
From Connecticut?
Right.
What brought you to Connecticut? How long have you been living out there for?
My then wife and I were looking to start a family and leave New York. This is in 1990, and that's when the murder rate was sky high and crack and the economy was falling apart. Really bad situation, and we thought about different places to move. We thought about moving to Israel.
Really?
And we...
so you knew what I was talking about when I was saying the right... What is it?
Right of return.
Right of return.
Yeah. We thought about moving to New Jersey and Westchester. And we eventually wound up moving to Connecticut, and we liked it there.
We're in Connecticut.
We moved initially to Norwalk.
Okay.
And then we found a house we liked, and we moved to Westport.
Do you know anything about Bridgeport?
Oh, yeah. I know about Bridgeport. Yeah.
Yeah?
It's like...
nice place?
It's got a nice zoo.
Yeah, nice zoo.
And it's got, the
Beardsley
gathering of the
Park.
vibes in the summer.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if I think it's like a economically stressed area.
That's a nice
it's got
way
a,
to
got,
put
a,
it.
got a nice music scene in the Black Rock area.
Black Rock Turnpike. So I mentioned my parents fled from Connecticut. That's where they came from. They came from Bridgeport.
Okay,
And
they
so,
probably made the right decision.
They told me, if I ever meet anybody from Connecticut, don't ever say that your family's from Bridgeport. Always say Fairfield County. I just think it's kind of funny.
No, Bridgeport, it's...
It's the armpit of Connecticut.
It's got... That's where I was when I got divorced, Superior Court in downtown Bridgeport.
Really?
So I always have I don't know if I'd say a soft spot in my heart for Bridgeport, but it certainly played a key role
spot
in my life at one time.
So do you like Connecticut?
Yeah, I do.
Where do you live now? You're not.
I live in Westport.
Westport's very nice.
I moved to Stamford for 7 years. Then I moved back to Westport when my son was finishing up high school so I could be closer to him, and I still live there.
So you did very well for yourself as a journalist.
Well, I'm the one that kind of brings down the bell curve of Westport incomes. I'm kind of on the couple of standard deviations to the left. I'm the one that brings the income level down.
After journalism, what did you end up getting into?
I went into corporate communications for accounting firms, basically. I worked for Price Waterhouse and then and KPMG and a couple of other stops along the way.
Do you like corporate America?
I do. I like professional services firms. I find for some reason I get along very well with accountants. And
you do?
Yeah. I find that I've done... white papers and newsletters.
Aren't accountants very bland people? It's a very bland job, but doesn't it attract those kind of people?
They're numbers oriented. They're cautious.
Yes,
but they, unlike lawyers, they keep their egos in check, and they tend to be very smart people. And I find that from a communications point of view, I find them easy to work with. I've worked with both lawyers and management consultants, and I find something about the accounting mentality. We connect.
Are you cautious?
Depends on what the topic is.
What do you think about guns? Like you were saying before, you think some people think that you're like a gun nut up here, and then down there they think you're liberal.
I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I think that
absolutely
what should be done about gun violence, I think it's a people issue.
Do you ever listen to Alex Jones? Do you know that?
No, I know who Alex Jones is. InfoWars. No, I don't.
I mean, Texas, right? He's from Austin.
He could be. Yeah, I think he is. But
Austin.
No, I mean, I used to listen to talk radio a lot, and I just got tired of all the commercials. I was a big fan of Rush Limbaugh, and just got tired of it.
You're a big fan of Rush Limbaugh?
Yeah, and back in the 90s, I was listening to him a lot, and I thought he made sense, and that's like what separates me from my friends up here. And think people will turn up their nose at somebody they may have never listened to. But I can't say I listen to him very much anymore anyway. I also listen to NPR, so I'm very open in my tastes.
Yeah, you're very open. And that's what it's all about, really. It's about being open to all different things. You don't just, compartmentalize yourself into one thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's really the real definition of liberal. Like, if you look at it, look it up in, like, the
classic
dictionary.
liberal.
The dictionary is, like, the legitimate definition is open-minded person who's willing to change.
And that's the class. And
I don't know why they demonize that word so much, Well,
I think because it's become intertwined with a lot of interference in people's lives and in the decisions people make. Nannyism, as Mayor Bloomberg gets accused of that.
Nannyism?
Nanny, you can't have drinks, you need to eat a certain kind of food, and so.
Yeah. It's government shouldn't be doing that.
I think conservatives, liberals, the terms both get demonized,
libertarian
and
viewpoint. Do you kind of share that?
I think there's a streak of libertarianism in me. Like, just let people lead their lives, and so even if you disagree with them, if they're not hurting you, leave them on. That's why I support gay marriage. If people want to do that, then let them go ahead and do it. I think that's the more bourgeois couples looking to have a healthy economy are out there, the better.
Yeah. So when did you start writing the book?
The book actually was written.
How did it come about and stuff? Like, how did you come up with the concept? When did you start writing it? All that stuff.
Sure. I initially started writing it with an essay I did for the Princeton Alumni Weekly in 2004 about my online dating experiences. It was called Technology Drives the Heart Afield, and you can actually find that online. And I'm a great one for kind of documenting what's going on in my life, so I was always keeping emails and printing out profiles I like, so I accumulated a lot of material. And I tell people stories about my dating life, and some of those are in the book. And people say, oh, you ought to write a book about it. And I said, okay. And the first publisher I approached wanted it.
Do you have anything crazy? Like, what kind of story would you be telling?
Sure. There was one story. There was a woman that I had seen on JDate, and she lived in Westchester. It looked like okay. So I contacted her, and nothing happened. And and that's what happens in JDate. You never know what's really going on with other people. So I kind of wrote it off, and I thought, okay. So, and then she was missing from JDate. I thought, okay. And then I saw her online, and I saw I IM'd her, and kind of wrote back and forth. She said, oh, give me a call. I said, well, okay. You talk about being bold, and okay. I'll see where this goes. And so I called her, and we were talking, and she said something like, I wasn't on JDate for a while. I said, yeah, that's okay. Maybe, she was dating somebody else, or she got tired of it. She kept saying, well, why don't you ask me why I wasn't on JDate? I said, no, that's okay. Everybody has a... She said, no, go ahead and ask me. I said, okay, why were you not on JDate? And she said, I was incarcerated.
Wow.
She had evidently threatened a judge and was in jail for 6 months. And that sounds pretty far-fetched.
Did you continue to date her?
No, there was nothing after that one conversation. In fact, I deliberately erased her memory.
You're too conservative.
I decided
would have been an excellent story. You should have continued to pursue her just for the story.
She sounded a little kooky, because what was a conversation turned into like a rant about the legal system. I thought
negativity.
Yeah, I was like, I don't need that.
Did you end up attaining your goal? You got a nice Jewish woman right now?
Yeah, I met a nice Jewish woman on JDate, and we've been dating for several years now. And
is marriage on the horizon?
I think we're happy the way things are now.
Do you believe in marriage? I know you believe in gay marriage.
I believe in marriage. If two people find each other and they're happy.
Would you do it again?
I haven't yet. I had my experience.
You don't need it, though, right?
No,
the only reason to do it is to procreate, right?
Right, for procreate, and we've both done our procreating, and we're past
so now
that.
You could just hang out, and it could be the same thing.
She lives in Westchester, I live in Fairfield, and we get together like today, and we do things, and we get along well, and she's been to Texas to meet my family, and I've met her family, so we get along well for what it is.
So what did we learn here today on today's podcast on the steps of the New York Public Library?
I've learned how great directional microphones are, because there's all kinds of noise going on around us. And
it's going to sound completely professional.
That's going to be beautiful. I learned about that people move from all different areas, that you can be a carpetbagger going in one direction, you can be a scalawag going in the other. But, once you sit down and talk to people, you connect.
Absolutely.
I would connect that to something about my Princeton background. We were talking about Westport and being, in wealth, and which I don't have. I went to Princeton with people that came from very wealthy families and went on to have some really great achievements in life. And I was very kind of cowed by these people. You know, I was like coming from a small town in Texas by people that had gone to private schools, had great educations. But I found once we graduated and then once we started going to reunions that we all had many more similar issues with parents, with children, with careers, with reversals in life, with illness. And just like people are people, you sit down and talk to people, and I think you're going to find there are more commonalities than there are differences.
I like the main Buddhist philosophy, you know? We're all human. We're all going to die someday, right? Nobody's better than anybody else. I'm below nobody, and I'm above nobody. That's the main thing that they teach in Buddhism, and I like that one the best out of all of the different religions. I just feel like that appeals to me the most, you know? We're all human. Everybody's the same. There's very humbling experiences coming from Princeton. You come up top of the world. It's a great school, but then you discover life happens. And,
I mean, you know, medical,
all kinds of twists of fate, medical things.
Medical issues and unemployment and relatives and
it's all about rolling with the punches.
And, you know, and just...
And taking the bull by the horns and doing things, you know, when you have an interview opportunity. Or
ride
whatever.
the mechanical bull when you find it.
That's right. So the bottom line is this. Where can people go to purchase your book, check you out, all that stuff?
Sure, you can find... There's a website, Wallach, WALLACH, coffeetownpress.com is a website, blog that I keep, arranged through the publisher, Coffeetown Press in Seattle. And I just posted something on there last night. This has information about the book. You can find the book on Amazon. I think Barnes & Noble carries it. You can get hard copies. You can get, you know, a Kindle version of it.
What's the main thing that this book teaches? What's the one thing, if you could say, that it conveys?
Be yourself. It's like if you're doing online dating or anything else, be yourself, but be your best self.
What kind of people would want to purchase the book?
People that are interested in spiritual journeys, because it's very much that. And I found people really responded best to like the early part of the book about my upbringing and kind of the difficulties of being like kind of Jewish in a very Christian environment. And people, I think, like that more than reading about my dating stuff.
I really like that. I enjoyed it, like I said.
And so there are people that are interested in spiritual stuff about also, like, there's a strong Texas element, you know, Texan in the big city. And then there's also, like, the religious element of how I incorporated Judaism into my life and some very serious issues in the back of the book, you know, like a woman I know got breast cancer, a woman I know I dated in the 80s died. And Judaism provides a framework for dealing with these sort of issues. And so there's definitely a serious part of the book.
How do they deal with that?
Well, with the woman who died, there's a prayer for the dead that you can say. It doesn't mention death. It's called the Kaddish, about magnified and sanctified is the name of the Lord. And
where does your soul go when you die, according to Judaism? Like I said, I'm Catholic.
There's like an afterlife, or world, you know,
same kind of deal as
world to come. But Judaism does not emphasize an afterlife, you know, heaven, hell, punishment.
It doesn't?
It's not. It's
like
really,
what happens then?
That's for God to sort out.
Really?
I mean, theologically, that's probably oversimplifying
so
it.
There's
but
a God,
that you
and
will,
whatever happens, happens, basically.
That God is the true judge. He will judge us all. And that what happens...
It keeps it very generic.
The ancient rabbis just didn't spend much time thinking about what the afterlife would be like.
They're not assuming because they don't know, right?
But I think it exists. I mean, I'm totally confident that there's something after this life.
Well, Mr. Wallach, Van Wallach, thank you so much for being on my podcast
my pleasure.
Today. I really appreciate it. For the Bobby Pickles podcast, from the steps of the New York Public Library in Midtown Manhattan, I'm Bobby Pickles.
FatEnzo.com, 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 FatEnzo.com.
Enzo.com. That's Enzo.com. That's Enzo.com. That's Enzo.com.